The congressional hearing room was bathed in spotlight as Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, sat with a calm face, straightening his tie. For almost 2 hours he had answered soft questions without breaking stride, his assurance unshaken. Then Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the freshman from Texas, took her turn. Leaning into her microphone with eyes fixed on Powell, the representative began in a voice that was steady but unmistakable in its force. "Mr. Powell, I've sat here while others danced around the obvious. Today I have one straightforward question about your Federal Reserve's $6 trillion decision that made 0 sense, a question nobody else has had the courage to ask." A shadow of discomfort crossed Powell's face. Phones were lowered, reporters edged forward, the room suddenly quiet. Crockett was ready. Weeks of digging through overlooked Fed reports and obscure data had armed her with thick folders few in Congress had ever opened. "Mr. Powell," she went on, raising a highlighted page, "the proof in my hand shows your policy wasn't merely flawed, it was catastrophically mistaken, and I believe today you will finally say so in front of the American people." Powell shifted his microphone, tension now clear in his shoulders. This was not the challenge he had prepared for, certainly not from a first-term member. Yet Jasmine Crockett was anything but typical. A battle-tested civil rights lawyer who had stared down powerful interests and won, she turned the chamber electric with expectation. What had started as routine was about to become a reckoning for the entire financial establishment. Voiceover paragraph. Before we dive deeper into this historic confrontation, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our breakdowns of the stories that matter most in politics and power. Now, let's watch how Jasmine Crockett took on one of the most untouchable figures in American finance. At the witness table sat Jerome Powell, 71, ex-investment banker, the picture of decades of institutional authority in his charcoal suit and understated tie. For years he had glided through these hearings, diffusing criticism with measured words and technical jargon. "The Federal Reserve remains committed to price stability and maximum employment," he had said earlier, his tone calm and commanding. "Our actions have steered the economy through unprecedented turmoil." Financial reporters nodded along, another predictable day on the Hill. Across the room waited Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, 43, representing Texas's 30th District. New to Congress but already known for meticulous homework and zero tolerance for evasive answers, she had spent her career as a civil rights attorney refusing to back down. The night before, past midnight, she had told her staff while poring over documents, "I'm not here for theater. Real families are hurting while theorists argue. Someone has to make the Fed answer." The stakes could not have been higher. Inflation had crushed households for years, groceries up 25%, homes out of reach, wages left behind. The Fed's $6 trillion adventure had, according to mounting research, widened inequality while delivering none of its promised benefits. Letters from constituents, a retired teacher skipping medicine, a young couple priced out forever, small businesses drowning in costs, were pinned to Crockett's office wall. These were the Americans she intended to speak for. As Powell finished another vague answer, Crockett reviewed her own handwritten notes. She hadn't come with staff talking points, she had personally dissected Fed data, consulted outside economists, and mapped every contradiction in Powell's past testimony. "The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes," the chair announced. Powell sipped water, unaware that Crockett had unearthed internal Fed warnings even seasoned financial journalists had missed. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, voice clear and unshaken across the room. "Mr. Powell, let's talk about the Federal Reserve's $6 trillion market intervention from 2020 to 2022. Powell gave a small nod, bracing for the usual questions on rates or inflation. "Would you agree the Fed's primary mandate is price stability and maximum employment?" "Yes, Congresswoman, that is correct," he answered, relaxing slightly. Crockett tapped her tablet. A chart appeared on the chamber screens showing the balance sheet exploding toward $9 trillion. "An extraordinary intervention, correct?" "Extraordinary times demanded decisive measures," Powell replied smoothly. "About those measures," she cut in, handing a document to an aide who walked it straight to Powell. "This is a confidential March 2021 memo from your own economists, obtained by my office through FOIA. It warned that continuing asset purchases at that pace would produce sustained inflation well above your 2% target. Yet you kept buying for another full year. Why?" The room stirred. Powell glanced at the page, his face tightening. "Congresswoman, policy always involves balancing risks. At the time we judged the danger of doing too little greater than doing too much. So you knew inflation was a risk," she pressed. "We recognized uncertainties." Another document flashed on screen. "This is the transcript of your April 2021 closed-door meeting with major bank CEOs where you told them, quote, inflation concerns are likely transitory and will fade in quarters, not years. Did you actually believe that?" Powell steadied himself. At that moment, based on the data then available, yes. Crockett revealed another report. "Your own San Francisco Fed researchers told the FOMC in February 2021, before you reassured those CEOs, that supply disruptions plus excess liquidity would create structural inflation your usual tools couldn't fix. Why were those warnings dismissed?" "Forecasting is imprecise," Powell answered, gripping his pen harder. "Different models produce different conclusions." "I'm not asking about models, Mr. Powell. I'm asking why your public assurances contradicted warnings from your own experts." 2 minutes remained. Crockett lifted a heavier stack. "Here are minutes from 5 straight FOMC meetings where staff showed asset purchases were inflating bubbles without boosting jobs, yet the committee voted to continue every time. Why did the Fed ignore its own research?" Powell's jaw set. "Monetary policy is complex. We acted on the best information we had." "That information included explicit warnings you disregarded," she shot back, turning another page. "Your research division published a paper showing these policies overwhelmingly benefited the top 10% while giving almost nothing to working families. Was that an acceptable outcome?" Silence blanketed the room. "The Federal Reserve does not target distributional effects," Powell said, voice tightening. "Our mandate is overall stability." "Yet your economists warned this would create instability," Crockett answered. She paused, locked eyes with him, and asked the question everyone would remember, "Mr. Powell, did the Federal Reserve make a $6 trillion mistake that hurt regular Americans and enriched Wall Street and the wealthy?" The chair started to intervene, but she continued, "My office has a full timeline matching your public statements against internal documents that show a consistent pattern of saying one thing while knowing another." Time expired, yet the chair allowed a response. Powell cleared his throat, composure fraying. "Congresswoman, these are difficult trade-offs." "That's not what I asked," she interrupted. "Yes or no, did the Fed make a $6 trillion mistake?" The room froze. Every camera, every eye on Jerome Powell. He looked at the mountain of documents, then at the congresswoman who would not yield. After a long breath he said, voice quieter, "In hindsight, yes, the scale of our intervention exceeded what was ultimately necessary." A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. Crockett kept going. "And that excessive $6 trillion program, who benefited most?" "Our policy supported the entire economy," Powell tried. "Your own study says 72% of the gains went to the wealthiest 5% while inflation crushed everyone else. Your economists predicted exactly that before you extended the program another year. Home prices rose 23% faster because of your actions, pricing an entire generation out of homeownership. Was that part of the mandate?" Powell's mask finally cracked. "No, it was not," he conceded, voice strained. "With what we know now, the scale was a mistake." Gasps echoed. The unflappable Fed chair had just admitted, on live television, to a historic $6 trillion policy blunder under relentless questioning from a first-term congresswoman. "To be clear," Crockett said into the stunned quiet, "you are acknowledging the Federal Reserve made a $6 trillion error that fueled inflation, widened inequality, and primarily rewarded the financial elite. Powell closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, resignation had replaced certainty. The evidence suggests our response was excessive and carried severe unintended consequences for many Americans. Yes. The chamber exploded. Lawmakers shouted over one another, reporters sprinted for the doors, the gavel pounded uselessly. In the chaos, Crockett and Powell exchanged one last steady look. She had forced the most powerful banker in America to admit the truth. Order was eventually restored only by a 15-minute recess. Cameras caught the stark image, Powell pale, hands trembling as he gathered papers, Crockett calm and methodical, stacking her folders. Markets reacted instantly. The Dow plunged 450 points in under an hour, Bitcoin surged 8%, and CNBC broke in. Fed chair admits $6 trillion policy mistake. Reporters mobbed Crockett in the hallway. She raised a hand. This wasn't about headlines. For 3 years Americans were told inflation was unavoidable. Today we learned the Fed had clear warnings and ignored them. By evening #6 trillion mistake trended nationwide. The next morning every major paper led with the same story. 2 weeks later Jerome Powell resigned. Congress launched sweeping oversight reforms, and a new generation of monetary policy, one forced to consider who actually wins and who loses, began to take shape. It all started with one determined representative from Texas who refused to let the obvious go unasked. Thank you for watching this extraordinary account of how a single pointed question changed American finance forever. If this video moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone wondering why everything got so expensive. Until next time, stay vigilant. Accountability always matters when power is on the line.